Thanks for everybody's patience and welcome to the February meeting of the Curriculum Committee of the Board of Lower Merion School Directors. We have at least one of our fellow directors, Dr. Sautner, is on the Zoom with us, possibly more joining later, and we will have another person joining at the table in a little bit. So Kim may or may not be. Whoever, was that you, Scott? Okay, no, that's fine. I just wanted to make sure I wasn't gonna have to do the like forever Zoom era of don't forget to mute yourself. Let me get through this quick and then I will mute myself. We have no course or textbook proposals or contract reviews for this month, so that means we'll be a little more brief. We have two presentations that I'm really interested to hear about, and I know that we've gotten some feedback from the community on these, or at least one of them being something that people are really interested to hear about as well. First, we're going to hear about the strategic plan to the comprehensive plan, which Mr. Weinstein will explain in further detail, because I'm the wrong person to explain that to all of you. And then after that wraps up, we're going to talk about Lunch and Learn, which I'm really excited about because I think in my 5+ years on the board, I haven't actually had a presentation on Lunch and Learn much, though I've heard about it. So take it away.
Well, thank you. Apologies in advance. It's a lot of me tonight. I'll be doing both presentations. Lunch and Learn, I asked Dr. Johnson from Lower Merion to do. We both led a lot of these presentations, and he wasn't available tonight. So I will start with the strategic plan, which is going to lead into the comprehensive planning that we're going to present to you. And I'm going to take you through a series of slides. I want to start with an introduction. In most meetings, I like to start with gratitude. I just want to recognize that I'm grateful to be here, and I'm grateful that the Eagles won last night. And there's not many things that unify an area like sports does. Even people that don't love sports, it's a bonding and unifying experience. So hopefully, as I'm speaking and people are listening from wherever they're listening, they feel that unison, whether they're a football fan or not. So I'm grateful for that. This next slide, this marks the 10th year of our strategic plan, and when I'm going to eventually, a few slides from now, get into our comprehensive plan, which will be asked for approval for 3 years in March. The part of building out a comprehensive plan is not redoing a strategic plan, it's reflecting it. Largely, it's a state compliance document that we're necessitated to do, and it should provide our direction, which is led by our strategic plan. So please know we're not redoing a plan that is already in place. At some point, we may do that. That's not what this is tonight. However, it is a good opportunity to reflect on where we've been the last 10 years, and I'll be able to do that in this presentation. And the way I frame it is strategic plan then and now, and what I separate the then from now was this little thing we had in between 2014, 15 year and this year, which was a global pandemic. And when we think about that, it did really change the way we operate in schools, probably forever, but it did actually land at the midway point. So when we think about this presentation, it's what did we do before the pandemic? And one thing I want to recognize in our 10 years of the strategic plan, and being here in the district through that whole time, one of the things I'm most proud about in the Lower Merion School District has been our response. And I know that that's defined one family at a time, but we quickly went to online learning and kept learning moving in the most difficult of times that schools have faced, at least in our era. So the strategic plan split up, split up by COVID, so I'll do a little bit before and then I'll go after COVID. And what's going to come out soon that I'm also proud of, that our buildings helped contribute, that document on the left is actually going to be a book or a PDF, or depending on the way you see it. It's going to be compiling the last 10 years of work in our district. And Sean Hughes, who has passed, who was our Lower Merion principal when I got here, Sean was the storyteller of the history of our district, and I think that's important work of where were we to where we're going. And I think this book provides kind of a little bit of a history of where we were and how we've grown and how we've changed, and also where we continue to need to grow. So that's kind of the backdrop, and that's coming soon. It's kind of complete. We just need some eyes on it before we release it more publicly. So that's something to look forward to. And the goal of it is to honor the last 10 years of work. The purpose is to provide examples of how the strategic plan was operationalized and came to life. And it's still those 5 pathways that you see at the bottom, which are redefining success, transformative curriculum, a commitment to professional learning, student-driven schools, and spirit of community. And when about 55 or so people got in a room in 2014, they came together what was known as a progressive strategic plan. It was non-traditional at that point, and it was done that way on purpose. And then when it was done, people felt really proud of this document, and they said, what does it mean? How will that operationalize in our schools? And we got down to about 8 areas of something that we dug into that we called focus explorations, and here are some of the big ones. And the next 8 slides are kind of showing you them in detail more. I'm going to cruise past them relatively quickly. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on them, but when we upload this to board docs available to the public, you can spend more time on your own looking through these, but they are the titles of them. And you see the last one is sleep in school start time, and that culminated into a major change for our school district this year, which is literally changing the start times for our levels between middle school going first and being pushed back later, high school in the second tier, and then elementary, and that was quite an undertaking, and that was done through a lot of community voice. So the next 8 slides are residencies, where guaranteed experiences for our learners, habits of mind, which is well intact in our elementary schools. Elementary report cards were transformed. We looked overall at the homework policy, and more so practices in our schools to do that better. Challenge success, especially at a time when mental health and high-performing school districts like ours, when students were so focused, and families, on an academic data points instead of overall wellness. Challenge success had us look at this a little and explore that to raise healthy young children in our school district. K-12 grading philosophy and movement around that. Restorative practices. I want to emphasize more so on the front end, the proactive side, which separates it from restorative justice. It's community building in our schools, and sleep in school start times. And when we think about strategic plan now, one of the last things our administrators get together in the summer, and we wanted to talk about what are the things we've done since the pandemic or brought to life a little bit more. Again, I'm going to click through these relatively quickly. There they are. Our schools said, hey, these are things that are happening in our schools. So then we tried to bring them to life a little bit more, and we labeled them in different areas through the 5 pathways. This will also be in that guide that I'm referencing that will be available to the community. And we put them together in kind of themes and redefining success. A lot of schools, especially in the pandemic, we realized how important executive functioning was as people were learning from home and trying to put things together, and what an important skill that is. So a lot of schools did work around that. Some guaranteed experiences and examples from different levels are shown here. And you can read that more. Like I said, it's uploaded at the board docs. Job-embedded professional learning. How our district, for example, this Friday we'll have a professional learning day. They're not the only days our teachers learn. We build them into the school days, and there's some sound examples here. Areas, student-driven schools. Where are students leading in our schools? Where do we hear their voice a little bit more? And you'll be able to read more about that. And there's some sound examples. And then spirit of community. How do we engage with our rich community of resources in our area? Local hospitals and organizations and nonprofits and businesses. How do we connect to them more intentionally so our students could learn from our community? And now I want to, so what we learned from that, that's how we're going to accentuate our comprehensive plan, which I'm going to move into now. So the next 3 years, a lot of this is state compliance, so we have a consultant to guide us through that to make sure we are doing that properly, and that's Chad Evans, and he did a really nice job. I want to give a special recognition to someone who's did the lion's share of this work, of the leadership of this work, which is Dr. Gaudioso, and I'm going to explain what this work means in these slides, but you've taken an integral role, and we appreciate you. You've done an outstanding job getting this to the document that we're going to briefly share with you tonight and make publicly available within the next week. So about the comprehensive plan, this slide we showed in October, which is the purpose, and all schools in our Commonwealth by the Future Ready Comprehensive Planning Portal must submit a comprehensive plan, including Lower Merion. And the process is, it's an iterative process. Again, it is not recreating a strategic plan, but reflecting it through a series of stakeholder reviews, and I'm going to go over what they were. And the format is largely out of our control. It's a document that we must submit to a state portal that they review, and after hopeful board approval in March, they will look through and eventually probably approve. because I think we're doing it right. And the purpose of this is to link our past to our future, which is why we intentionally started with the strategic plan. We want to honor the past. Who were we? Where did we begin? What should we celebrate? Acknowledge the present. Who are we now? How have we iterated or grown? And how have we fallen short of those expectations? And then design the future from that. Who do we want to become? How do we iterate and grow? What expectations do we want to create? Again, it draws off our strategic plan and honoring the past. We're not recreating our mission and visions. Those things are not happening through this process. We're acknowledging the present, and there are ways that we're meant to do that through the Future Ready Index, looking at our local data, making plans around that, and then designing the future through a goal-setting process that the state takes us through. This is something we showed you in October, and now we're in February. So what happened in between there was, through our consultant, we reflected our strategic plan and the current things that we're working on, things you've heard at board meetings recently, like MTSS, professional learning communities, things that we're doing already, and how are we enhancing them and setting goals around them that the state takes us through. So here we are at the board update in February 10th. In about a week, we're going to upload this more publicly, and it has to be available publicly for 30 days before we come back to you in March, and we'll present or ask for your approval. Here's what the review sessions look like, the process. So there's priorities, there's goals, and there's action plans. You'll get at the end of the presentation, we're going to share some of those, a sample of an action plan. But each priority goal needs 4 action plans and a 3-step process between each of them, and you'll see what that looks like. So this is the overall objectives, and in each session that we go through, what did you appreciate about our goal? What clarifications do you need? And what else are we missing that you may want us to consider? And in that process, we've taken this through 2 public sessions that we actually led in this room, in person, 2 virtual sessions, public sessions, twice through our principals meetings, 2 other times through our academic council, which includes all of our academic administrators beyond our principals. And so through all of those processes, we get revisions. We continue to update that until we're to our final draft. This is the format. We don't have any options around this. This is what it looks like. There are check boxes that we have to submit when we submit this to the state. And the comprehensive plan priority goals, I'll pause on these and let you there's 5 of them that reflect each of the pathways. So I'll show you those, let you read them. I'll do a sample action plan, and that'll be this presentation. So priority 1 is redefining success. Again, that's the first pathway of the strategic plan. We did not reinvent that, and I'll pause and let you read this. And if you're in a place where you're not able to, we will redefine success to emphasize creativity, critical thinking, a love of learning and innovation, moving beyond traditional academic indicators through enhanced formative assessment, strengthened MTSS, and refined goal-setting practices. We ensure targeted, equitable progress for all students. These efforts will celebrate individual growth, promote holistic achievement, and prepare students to thrive intellectually, creatively, and personally. I want to pause 1 second and bring this to life a little bit more. When I entered Lower Merion, remember driving in, I get off at the turnpike, I come up Matson 4 Road, and I drove by lawn signs that were against standardized testing. That was the time that I came into the district. They were all over the place. There was an opt-out movement going. It was a sign of the times. It was alive and well here. And at the time the strategic plan was made, we talked about schools are more than that. Students are more than that. So there was a big emphasis on redefining success. And what we do sometimes, and I want to name this, is we sometimes swing that pendulum and go too far one way or the other, and both of those things are simultaneously important. And we recognize that and know that. Test scores measure standards that the state says we need to teach young people, and we should assess them and know if they're knowing that and intervene when they don't. And that's part of the plan. And that's not the only thing people come to school for. We're raising young people. We spend as many wake hours with students. What does that mean? That's the habits of mind work. That's knowing that you're going to go through adversity. You're going to have to think flexibly, metacognition, those things of how do I become a learner? How do I become an independent learner? So that's important to me as an educator to name that, because we sometimes do one thing and then we go to the extreme on the other, and usually the answer is a balance of those things, and I think that's true in this case. This is a sample action plan. We have about 20 of these in the plan, again, mandated. This will be, I don't expect you to read all the tiny print. That's why we upload them and allow you to see that later on. And we're going to put the whole plan online. But these are our goals. When we unpack that, what does that look like? Who's going to do that? When is that going to be? And you'll be able to see that spelled out. Here's the second this is the second priority goal, again, 2 of 5. Transformative curriculum. We'll implement a transformative interdisciplinary curriculum that connects disciplines, fosters inquiry, and prepares students for the demands of a rapidly changing world. Flexible scheduling and innovative approaches will break down traditional silos, enabling students to explore relevant content and develop critical thinking skills. Enhanced humanities and STEM integration, refined learning blocks, and expanded problem-based learning units will ensure a comprehensive and adaptable education where innovation is the rule, not the exception. That's broad. What does that mean? And that's where the action plans would spell that out a little bit more. 3 is our commitment to professional learning, something we believe strongly in. Not only is it important that our students are growing, but through the hiring process, we want people that want to continually grow in our school district. That's our staff and all professionals and support staff in our district. Student-driven schools, where are there opportunities for our students to lead in our buildings? That's important to us. How can we bring that to life more? And that's in the plan. And then finally, spirit of community. How do we partner with the vibrant area that we live in, work in, and raise children in, and how do we bring that to life? And that's in the plan as well. And we will be back in March for final board approval. And I thank you for your time, and I ask for your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Weinstein. That was a whole boat of information in a very brief time. I think you get the gold star for racing through that very, very quickly. Do any of my fellow board members have questions? Because I managed to take a lot of notes, and I will be the Curry tonight, asking all the questions. Yeah, no.
But I am here just in case.
Curry, would you or Kimberly have any questions that you wanted to ask?
I'm sure you're going to cover it, Shana, so
Okay,
go run with it.
I got you. Sarah?
I do.
Abby? No? Okay. Curry?
I do, but
Go for it.
can you hear me? Okay,
I
good.
can.
wasn't
Go for
sure if
it.
you could hear me. This might be for Larry, but I just want to kind of ask this out loud. Is we know our strategic plan is dated. We know that our next superintendent, when he begins in April, is going to really take on the charge with the board and the community to write the next strategic plan. So Scott, the question I have for you, and Larry, feel free to add to that, is if this is a comprehensive plan that goes from 25 to 28, when we have a new strategic plan, how do you marry those two back together if priorities or goals change, when priorities and goals change?
Sure, and I think, and I can't speak necessarily for the state's intentions, but I will say that a lot of this is oversight to make sure that things are in place. There's many things that we have to have accountability to the state. So a lot of this is reflecting what we've done and showing that there's plans in place. It doesn't mean that we submit it. We're bound by that. You will notice that as you look into the plan, there are things that whatever would be recreated with the community's input. MTSS is something that we're going to continue to do in schools. It's also state-driven. So a lot of those things that we know we're going to continue to do because it's research-based and the best practices in schools are going to be in there, it won't lock us in to recreating something that with the community's values led by a new superintendent. Good question.
Yeah, and that was a good answer. Every school district in the Commonwealth has to do this. It's a requirement. And Scott, you framed it perfectly. Mostly, I would say almost everything that is in here are things that we're doing, came out of the last strategic plan, and we're doing it, and we're saying we want to get better at it, which we will do. So Kurt, to answer your question, it's a compliance document, and when you guys initiate a new strategic plan, that's going to guide the district. And we could even, I think you can even update this, right? I believe you can go in and update it. I'm not 100% sure when you submit it, Scott. Do you know that? Like, let's say in a year we wanted to update it. Yeah, go ahead. Maybe not.
There's not a lot of follow-up after they approve the initial
Right,
plan.
right.
However, we were intentional with the design of some of the goals. So there's some places where it says, the first action step is convene a group to evaluate, to make set goals, which would include the new superintendent.
Right.
So the places that are obvious where we have to be in compliance, like we have standards-aligned curriculum, we're working towards, stronger tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 practices. Those I don't anticipate changing, but we did leave latitude for stakeholder input along the way.
Yeah, as Scott said, the state wants to just ensure that every district has a plan. That's this
Yep.
comprehensive plan.
Curry, is that everything? Can I jump in, or you have more?
Oh, you.
Okay, so first, most of what I want to say is just feedback. I wanted to reiterate that so just for context of anyone who is watching, I was elected to the board November before COVID hit and was sworn in and had 2 regular meetings before we went virtual. So my initial experience with this has been through the entirety of the COVID experience, and oh boy, was that a trial by fire. And I want to say that the response and the work and the dedication from this administration and from our past administrators to make that, to get that was incredible. The work was amazing, and you guys, I want to use a word that is not appropriate for a meeting, but you guys really killed it. Perfect, amazing. You all deserve credit for that one more time in public. I also wanted to shout out all the effort that everybody put in on start times, because we were talking about that. It was really great. I like the guiding questions that you used in there. And okay, so okay. The reason I wanted you to stay was I just wanted to mention about residencies. Do we still have any grades that don't have a residency?
We have elementary, we've had them, 5th grade, 6th grade is doing the Weitzman, 7th grade and 8th grade are piloting something this year.
Okay, so that we
Yep.
don't have any more grades that don't have a...
Right, we at least have everybody piloting something this year, whether it's a long-term commitment, we're gonna see how it goes this year.
Fantastic. And I will tie in with Megan, because you are our policy queen, just that I would love to have the discussion on policies surrounding field trips, because I know that that tends to tie in with our discussion about residencies, and there's been concern on people wanting more of that and people worrying about, or the district worrying about the amount of resources and sort of things that have to be done to go along with that. And so I think that would be a really productive discussion to have in your committee. I really love the clear outline of the process and the timeline. I think that's really great transparency and really helpful for us and for the community. And the other thing is, I love that rubric on slide 43, and I think that it might be worth thinking about how we could apply a rubric like that. I know that you being the administration, have gotten a lot of questions from the board in recent months, years about how we're evaluating different programs.
Yep.
And I know that educators would love a rubric. And so something like this could serve as a really great skeleton as an evaluation tool for that sort of thing, just so that we had a benchmark that was kind of uniform across it. I'm not saying it has to be that one, but I think that could be a good diving board to go for that.
No, I appreciate the feedback. A lot of parts of it, especially the COVID part.
I know that was all over.
No, I appreciate it, especially the COVID part, but just because I know what that represented by a lot of people that transformed the way we do school, quite literally in doing it in brick and mortar buildings to fully online, and then have people back, and I remember it really well. And
you guys stood up an entire virtual school in 3 weeks. Y'all, for the community, we thought we were going to close for 2 weeks. We thought we were going to have 3 days to prepare for a 2-week closure. People were preparing lessons to send home with their students. And then we were just home. We were trying to figure out how to get one-to-one devices for everybody. There was the whole LMSD at home with over 1,000 students. It was what? Oh, and Ms. Buckman was getting food to like all of our students that were eating it. That was, I had completely forgotten. There were a million things to do, and it was a monumental effort that you all deserve another round of kudos for.
Thank you.
Oh, and I'll get to those in one more second. The one thing I missed, and I am only thinking about this as I have a fifth grader now, and it's report card time, is that we were talking about the changing the approach to the elementary school report card, which I know started a couple years ago. And then we changed our division of our grade bands so that fifth grade, which was in elementary school when that change to the report card system happened and is now in middle school. And so the fifth graders in middle school have a different report card process than the sixth, seventh, eighth graders. And I was just wondering how you feel like that's working out, if that's something we want to keep, if that's something we should consider readjusting to align with the grade bands, if that's a good, helpful transition for our fifth graders or our fifth grade teachers. I know that was your baby.
Well, actually, that ended up being part of the middle school, looking at the grade report card last year. So there was a committee, they started the work, they got to a certain point, I think looking at, quarters, trimesters, and then, how we have habits of mind in elementary, they were looking at thrivers, and with all the transitions we had starting last spring, that work was sort of extended. So I'm not sure exactly where they are, because I'm not working with the middle school team on that right now, but that is something that the conversation's continuing on.
That'd be great, and I think it's definitely worth talking to the fifth grade teachers because I know they're in that and they have lots of experience. I tried to ask my kids' teachers, but man, a 10-minute conference is not enough to have that kind of question and actually talk about your own kid at the same time. But I appreciate that effort and the ongoing work that's happening. Ms. Buckman, we have some. Todd,
Yeah,
sorry.
so,
I didn't realize.
I'm not really on the committee, but I'm just here for moral support.
You're on the board. You're entitled to your feedback.
So as I see it, there's really like two levels of conversation tonight, right? I mean, there's the compliance document for the state, which is largely checking a box. Then there's the more meaningful thing with teeth for us, which is the strategic plan, which is 10 years old. In some ways, those are very aspirational. The community thinks they're a little too vague, but they're kind of timeless things, right? We want an engaged community. We want effective professional learning. We want assessments that reflect the totality of our children's understanding. We want to horizontally integrate the curriculum so things are connected. That's as valid now as it was 10 years ago, right? So that we don't really have to overhaul that. The challenge we have and the community has, and you guys, is how do you reduce that to practice, right? And I think that's what some of the board wants to see, the teachers want to see, the community wants to see. I mean, we're not going to fix that tonight, but then, when Dr. Ranelli gets here, this is an evolving thing for years, right? But that's the bigger challenge, right? How do you set interval goals? How do you know if some of this stuff is working? Like, it sounds good, but how do we really know? And what do we need to be doing now to put us in a position 2 years, 3 years, 5 years from now to know whether or not what we're doing is effective? Like, is there things we should be capturing now that are maybe hard to capture retrospectively? These are higher order level
No, they're the right questions.
considerations, and we're not going to fix it tonight, but just to frame, there's sort of two levels of things we're talking about here. And we look forward, actually, Larry, we're lucky to have this all fixed by April 13th when you leave. But, anyway, we look forward to these substantive discussions about, what can we do along the way? What are reachable goalposts? What are the effective ways of assessing ourselves? These are the tougher kind of conversations we're going to have.
Well, and I think that's totally true. And I realize that I've gone tangential from this is not really discussion of our compliance, and I'm very sorry, and I appreciate your indulging me. I think that that's a really good point, and that perhaps for the discussion when we're at the point where we're talking and having our focus groups about the strategic plan, that we include as a balance to our goal setting evaluative measures for that, so that nobody's trying to perform to a measure that's being sort of thrown up there once the program's already started. Like, I don't know, personally, me in my life, I love it when the parameters are set out before me before I start the task. And so that seems like that could be a really good hand-in-hand thing we could do as part of strategic planning, is also include the evaluative stuff as part of our strategic plan. Sound good?
And,
Everybody covered? Oh, now we have online comments, unless we have any other. Scott, did you have anything else you wanted to add, or was
No,
it?
just to briefly respond, I think you're right. The 5 pathways were written to be timeless. It was actually the goal when they were writing that. And the language we used pre-pandemic a little bit more frequently was OKRs, which is our objectives and key results. What are our objectives that we want to move forward? And what are the key results that we got there? And it was a lot of the language that you were sharing, and we agree. That's the right language. Get people together, and some of that's in that comprehensive plan, but as we would come together and build one more community base with a lot more involvement. That makes sense.
Great, okay, now we will go to Ms. Buckman.
The first comment is from Kim Lippitz of Narberth. The strategic plan is now 10 to 11 years old. Is this a normal duration for a strategic plan? Are there no guidelines to meet the plan? A decade seems like a very long time. Will district update the strategic plan, show what we met, show what we haven't? 10 to 11 years seems like time for an updated strategic plan. If objectives haven't been met after 11 years, why not? What assessments are in place to identify if strategic goals are met?
So I don't believe that there's an actual rule for how often that, I mean, I don't know that are we required to have a strategic plan? And so it's just sort of, yeah, so we're not actually required to have a strategic plan. We had it as a guiding document. I know right about in my first year, the plan was hopefully to review the strategic plan, and then we had just a slight pandemic there. And then we've had a few bits of turnover with our superintendency, who is the person who leads this operation of creating a strategic plan, and we generally like people to have a little chance to get settled and get to know our district before we start in that kind of endeavor. So that frankly has been why it's not been something that's happened, but it's definitely something that the board considered when we were interviewing candidates, and it's something that we have already talked to Dr. Ranelli as making one of his priorities for his employment here.
And just to follow up, Dr. Ranelli and I have spoken often about this, so I know it's on his radar, absolutely.
The next comment is from Michelle McGill of Ballackinwood. It says, Scott, I really appreciate you speaking from a goal-oriented point of view. Goals, objectives, measures, and action steps should be attached to all of our efforts. Great job. Another comment from Ms. Lippitz of Narberth. Can the administration assure that during all staff supplementary education, will administration assure that staff and faculty have a no cell phone computer policy so that staff are not on phones during training such as a disability training or diversity training or anti-Semitism training? I would hope if students are expected to put down their phones during classes, that staff would likewise be expected to not be on phones during staff development trainings. Can anyone address how we can assure staff are not on phones during staff trainings? Further comment from Ms. McGill of Ballackinwood. Looking at the strategic priorities in LMSD plan, which goal aligns to our equity work? Is there an action plan for this work? Kim Lippitz of Narberth, strategic plans should not be timeless in my opinion. Michelle Vessel of Gladwin, this presentation is a very general overview. How do we know how these actual plans are being implemented? And will you share with us what is working and what has fallen short when you have focus groups or community members involved? If a parent is interested in being part of a focus group, is that possible? Collaboration with the community would be helpful. Another comment from Ms. Lippitz of Narberth. If strategic plans are not required and no benchmarks need to be met, perhaps we scrap it and meet more measurable goals. Ms. Vessel of Gladwin, what is the subject of the upcoming teacher training? And that's all the comments so far.
Thank you for that feedback. I think we are going to move on to our Lunch and Learn presentation, which I'm really excited about. So take it away.
Thanks. You too. I'll start with, this is a little bit of an outgrowth of the strategic plan, and you'll see the strategic plan woven into this presentation. This presentation I'm going to share with you, parts of it are given to the student body annually at Lower Merion and Harriton High Schools. We also have given this presentation to roughly 40 to 50 schools in the area that visit us often annually to see what Lunch and Learn is. We did not create Lunch and Learn. We were the first in our area to do it as a school district. Me and a bunch of district staff, and probably a decade ago went to Fairfax County, Virginia. And one of our consultants from Solution Tree, who was leading us through PLC training, talked to us about Lunch and Learn and what they do there, among other things that we went to visit. And a few of us went for a trip and visited a high school that led Lunch and Learn. That was the model that we took from, and we made it our own, which I'll share with you in the slides that are to come. And since then, we were the first for a couple years, and the first school that I know that went to us was Unionville Chadsford, their high school, and they visited us probably 4 or 5 times. So when we welcome visitors to see our school, we had the Montgomery County Intermediate Unit, and about 17 of the Montgomery County principals come to Harriton and see this, and many schools have since gone to Lunch and Learn. There are many benefits to the model, which I'll show you as we go, but that's a little bit of the history. We're in our about 9th year of implementation. We had to make some alterations for COVID, and we've changed throughout the years based on things that we're learning that are going to work better, and we continue to look at adjustments to what Lunch and Learn is. But I'm going to give you the broad overview. And this is pretty much what we show students annually and our guests. Why, what guides us, and a lot of this is our strategic plan. What this allows for is students' choice and empowerment, which high school students really seem to enjoy, is having choice in what they're doing. Students owning their learning, and a culture of trust and respect. And the first two, we recognize that every teenager is not ready to make decisions on their own, that they need guidance. The language that we use with students is, if you show us that you can't make decisions on your own, of course you would imagine adults intervening. Oftentimes that's either academic or behavioral in ways that you might need more support. And I'll go through in the presentation what that looks like. But we start with, as educators, we don't say, you can't do this, you can't do that. That doesn't resonate with students. We talk about what this could be, what the culture is that would allow this to take place. And when I say this, Lunch and Learn for an hour every day is students to have control of that time. We have one lunch for the entire building staff and students, and I'll go through what this means. And Ms. Kalish, you talked about you want to understand this more. Our high school parents, our 8th grade parents are learning what this is as they're doing their transition nights. And our parents of elementary students don't know what it is, so this is a good opportunity to share those things that we should refresh every once in a while and share a little bit more about what it is and how it came about. When we talk about culture, we talk about that differently in our schools. Taking care of each other, we take care of our building, and we do that with collective responsibility. Because this is shared time and space, part of being in a community is coming up with certain expectations of how do we do this well. Because this isn't typical from a lot of us when we grew up. We had 3 blocks of lunch, you were confined to the cafeteria, and this is a very different paradigm from that. And it requires a very different level of expectation in student behavior. So we're intentional in the way we talk about that. And what collective responsibility means, different things. At Harriton, we use terms like good for culture. At Lower Merion, they talk about ACES expectations. But we make those talking points our own. What does it mean to be a community member in these high schools? And we try to live them with our staff annually. Through our in-service, we do a lot of community building with our staff. Happy teachers make for happy classrooms and improve student learning. We believe in a lot of that. Here's what it is. In the middle of the day, for 60 minutes, the entire school is Lunch and Learn. Faculty, counselor, staff are available. Now, our staff has 30 minutes of lunch and 30 minutes of office hours or learn time that they have to be available to students. And it solves a lot of questions. It gives a lot of answers throughout the day. Here's the actual schedule and where it lives. The only difference is that A day on the far left, there's an advisory period, which is why it looks like the others, but Lunch and Learn is still an hour. It's just hard to graphically show it. Here's some of the feedback when we last interviewed students. Cross-section of grades, close to 600 responses. Students think largely it allows for more downtime. We took the feedback that was more representative of people. It allows for downtime. Some people really need a full hour midday to decompress. My daughter goes to a high school that does Lunch and Learn that's not Lower Merion schools, and she has lunch and lunch sometimes, meaning she doesn't necessarily go see her teachers every day, and I don't consider that a waste. She sits with her friends. It's in the middle of the day, and she has great value of that. It's an important part of our day, and it allows her to be as successful as she can be. And sometimes we have kids that do learn and learn. We don't always want that to be the case. We want kids to eat midday, but they see teachers for a full hour. And part of that choice is making those decisions when you're in high school of what do I need today? Do I need to do homework because after school I'm really scheduled and I can do that during the day and not have to do it afterwards? You can do that. Do I need to just decompress? So midday decompress, found an amazing way to see teachers, get help with tests for a good amount of time. Do you pack or buy? That's important. A lot of our students pack. We depend on that. If they all bought, we'd have more of a logistical challenge. So when the bell rings to start Lunch and Learn, by far it's the most crowded time at our lunch lines. That's when most people rush there. Other students realize, I don't want to wait in long lines. I'm going to go see teachers now, and then I'm going to go later when there's no lines. People learn to live with that and deal with it different ways. You usually see a pattern of behavior. Same kids, I have questions from parents. How do you know where kids are? I just know when I turn this corner who I'm going to see there. How am I going to find them in emergency? It's an antiquated question from when you were young. Your kid has a cell phone, you know they probably turned it on, and even though it's supposed to be off and away, but we also know where they're going to be. They're off and away in classes, and sometimes they have them on them. What students said, the only downside for me is there's trash, and there is. We added trash cans. We continue to adjust that. We talk about collective responsibility, that when it's your trash, it's everyone's trash, please pick it up. We ask our student council to lead other students, and it's not just adults talking about the space we share, but students talking to students, and largely they do. Does it add academic stress to your day? It doesn't mainly for most students. It relieves academic stress, allows me to make up work and meet with teachers. I do not think it adds academic stress. It builds in time during the day. We've added collaborative spaces throughout both high schools. Students found that useful. You'll see pictures of those in a second. So options for students. You can go to the cafeteria, like old school. I'm going to go eat in the cafeteria and sit in there. You have access to your teachers, your counselors, your staff. You can go to the library. We have a learning center where students go and they can make up tests during that time. We open up our gym, our weight room, and exercise options. So you don't. Some of these clubs are really expensive, but I really value fitness, and I don't want to do it outside the school day. Kids actually work out. If I go into the gym, I know who I'm going to see in there, and they're going to work out every day. You go to your special area classes. Also, throughout the day, you would have students, I need to go see my counselor. Every teacher knows you do that during Lunch and Learn. It meets all logistical response. I have to turn something in. I have to do that. Lunch and Learn, answer to all of that. So what are the collaborative spaces? Very few areas we keep kids off limits, but we tell them we don't want to be in the vestibule. We shouldn't welcome visitors and have them step over teenagers. They should be able to have a clear path. They shouldn't step over teenagers going up steps. We should allow that to be free. You shouldn't play music out loud. You can wear headphones during that time and unwind. The library, that's Lower Merion High School, is a great place to be. Students love convening there, working in groups or sitting and talking sometimes. An open collaborative space that kids can work, that's Harriton. This is Lower Merion, Harriton, outside at Lower Merion, inside at Harriton, benches outside the library at Lower Merion. So these are all spaces that you'll see students see where there's actual seats. But every once in a while, when I was taking a tour one day, I went to an area that was not furnished. And this is what kids also like to do during Lunch and Learn. Sit with their friends in small groups. There are 17 students in that small little space. And so there are different areas. Again, not traditional. Sometimes students are eating in those areas. We ask them to take care of that area. We thank our custodians for taking care of a building that became increasingly harder when we did Lunch and Learn than just the cafeteria. And so that's like a message I would show it when I was at Harriton, of Harriton is my home. It's a mural that's actually on one of our walls. And so you spend as much time in our schools as you do in your home and your wake hours. Let's take care of it and make it an awesome place to be. And largely students do that. Advantages, all hands are on deck. Commitment in the middle of the day. We don't schedule many meetings, but clubs have the opportunity to meet, so they don't have to meet after school. A lot of club time during that time. Students are empowered to earn choice. Positive effect on stress levels, as said the survey, and anecdotally seeing that. Earning the right to choose. So at both schools, you start out, and at Harriton they call it Highlander status, at Lower Merion they call it ACES status, but that means the time is yours. Do what you want with it, and the large majority of our school has that status. Every once in a while, as I referenced earlier, a student needs adults to intervene and make decisions on their behalf, and a counselor, a teacher, or an assistant principal may put a student on a plan, meaning, hey, you need to go see your biology teacher on Monday and Tuesday, your math teacher on Wednesday, and they make a plan based on your current needs. Or you're not making great decisions with that personal free time that you have, so we need you to go here and do work, or just be there and not have the access to your building till you can make better decisions. It happens occasionally. And supervised status is just more intensive support of governing a student's time a little bit more when they're not able to make great choices. And that happens periodically. And I thank you.
That was fantastic. Do any of my colleagues have questions? Abby, go ahead.
Thank you very much. So I have a question. You had mentioned that the weight room was open, the gym was open. Are music rooms open? And
They
art
are.
rooms? Art rooms as well?
And they're heavily used during that time. A lot of times when you have music, like we call them period sets, it's just language we use, a set of the day.
Right.
It often brings people together and allows to play. And sometimes, to be quite honest, a lot of our students that enjoy music and play music go to the music area because that's where they sit and eat lunch socially. Mm-hmm. But the rooms are open.
Thank you.
Yeah, so as I understand, the teachers are supposed to, ideally, half of their time is for, I guess, their own lunch, and the other half of the time is 30 minutes is to interact with students, right, to teach.
That's correct.
And then, so I guess I'm trying to figure out, do you keep track or record, like, where the students actually go and whether the teachers are actually teaching students during that time? I mean, I imagine there are probably some teachers that are popular and there's lots of students that go to those rooms, and there are other teachers that maybe not many kids go. Is that recorded? And then the same thing from the kids. Like, do we keep track of where the kids go when? And the reason I'm asking, like, if there are teachers that a lot of students go to, that's great, and it's probably very clear why the students are going there. But if there are teachers who have 30 minutes where they could be teaching and no students are going there, well, why is that?
Yep.
And what are we learning from that? And we have students that, on the other hand, who could benefit from an extra 30 minutes of math or whatever, but for whatever reason, there's some barrier and they're not taking advantage of that. Are we recording that in any way? And if so, then what are we doing to try to make sure that the opportunity we have is being maximized by everyone?
Can I just piggyback before you answer that? I just want to clarify. The teachers aren't instructing at this point. They're just there to help students that are coming for assistance, right, or have questions?
Yeah, I guess the semantics are maybe reteaching, intervention.
Right,
Yes.
yeah, I meant they weren't
Not
like
new material
sitting up,
teaching.
planning a lecture. Right, okay.
Correct. Yep.
Yeah.
Not new material, but going over stuff to get help. Yep. Somebody was absent. I didn't understand it the first time you taught it, knowing that everybody doesn't learn at the same rate. The broadest question is, do you track that? And a lot of our teachers individually do, and there are different trends that you'll notice. Before and after tests, rooms are more crowded. Math traditionally has more visitors than everybody else, probably science second. The higher level classes have students more frequently go to those classrooms than college prep students do. Different teachers draw different students from, ideally when you work in PLCs and 5 of you teach biology, I should be able to go to any of you and get support in a certain concept. So at its best, hey, today I'm leading a session on this, go see that teacher. Largely, people go to their own teachers, not other teachers though, but they can. So they're probably the trends. We do have teachers that track that. When parents sometimes call or a parent conference, hey, I hear you. You want your child, and a lot of our conversations aren't necessarily passing failing. They're more conversations in our schools are the A-B conversation, and a lot of those times a teacher will have data of, I understand your child does not show up during that time where they can get extra support, so they'll track it in that type of way to know who's coming back. But we have a retest culture, meaning if we value the learning, we don't just give a test and play the game, track that and move on, but that learning is important. So there's a really big culture of students that take tests, that if you want to improve your score and demonstrate that you've understood the learning later, they come back and learn, test during lunch and learn. So it's used a variety of ways. And one of the questions, it's also like, I think implicit in what you're saying is, we're really thoughtful on what we govern and make them do and not, because every time you want to put a constraint in place, there's an unintended outcome. So a lot of this still is largely dependent on choice in different areas. However, if a student's not being successful, that's where our achievement team or the MTSS process will come in and make plans for students.
No, I just wonder if, I don't know, like through the Link It thing or whatever the latest thing we approved and paid for, but is there some way to actually track this? I mean, not forcing kids to do anything, but every time a kid comes to my lunch and learn, I'm going to mark them off. And then at the end of the year, you'd have all this data, like how many kids are coming, which types of kids are coming, when are they coming, for what, which classes, how does that correlate with their performance? And there might be a lot we could learn as a community if we followed that. And we might have the systems in place to just make it real simple. Yeah. Or perhaps we don't, I don't know, I'm just asking.
I'm not going to argue against that. That's interesting. I'd love to see that data laid out. The practicality of some of it would be like, it's oftentimes somebody will come by for something quick as opposed to sitting there for a half hour. One of the things to govern, just so you kind of understand, is I teach social studies. I teach 3 different classes. And I don't mean like 3 different groups of students. I mean I teach AP US History, I teach Global Studies 1, and I teach a different course. And they come to me at the same time. So when I talk about not governing it too much, we allow teachers to say, hey, today there's a test coming up in this class tomorrow. I'm going to carve out my lunch and learn today. I'm going to shut it down for everybody except this class. So there's so many variations of what makes sense for that teacher and groups of students that it's pretty hard to put a lot of constraints on it and unify it. But your question makes sense. I would love to see the data you're talking about.
I'm going to jump in and I know we tend not to agree on these things, disagree on these things, but on this, I kind of do. My own personal high school experience was kind of similar to this, but on a full day schedule, where if you did not have a class in a certain period, you were allowed to spend it anywhere in the building. We sat on the floor, in the hallways, in the music hall, by the gym. You hung out with your favorite teacher if they had a free period. And it just, as someone who experienced that, I think the value in balance to the value of data is the sense of autonomy and self-ownership and freedom for our students. Like, our kids are monitored in so many ways, and especially with the addition of phones and social media and all this stuff that didn't exist in the same way when we were students, to have a little bit, like a place where they can really be making their own decisions and having that kind of autonomy, I think is its own value. And not to say that it's not worth trying to measure that kind of stuff, but in my own one person's opinion, I feel like those things outweigh the potential for that. Like, I know data is so attractive, and I know we want to dig into the nitty gritty, but I think this is, to my 2 cents, a qualitative time where the value in just letting them experience the boon of what we're giving them in this program, which, by the way, this rocks. Now I see why everybody's obsessed with Lunch and Learn. This seems like a really successful endeavor. And so thank you for that presentation. Did you have
Yeah, no, I'm just going to say, Dr. Ricky, we could look at more qualitative methods. And I think it's something that Frank and Scott can work with when he comes in. One of the things I'm seeing in a short time is we've got a lot going on. That's a double-edged sword. I mean, sometimes you have a lot going on. You have to ask, what are we doing really well? And it kind of goes back to something I think we were all saying earlier today in professional development and things like that. I was talking with Jen today and Scott about this. I think we've got to be more intentional in our professional development. I really believe that that's something Frank, I know Frank will look at it and he'll see it. But the points you bring up are very well taken, as are yours, because it is more of a social thing, but there's also a component of remediation that could be really powerful in this. So like one of the things I'm wondering is when we see, Scott, I don't know, when we see students about this time of year and they're not doing well, is there a counselor or a teacher or a principal maybe going to them and saying, are you using lunch and learn? Yeah, so I don't know, if especially now that we have grades. So
We do that.
you do?
Yeah, that happens, yeah, systematically.
Sorry, I don't have much of a voice, but I have a few logistical questions
Sure.
for Lunch and Learn. And you mentioned how teachers sometimes will say that I'm only going to see students from this specific class today for Lunch and Learn because there's a test coming up or whatever. How is that communicated to all of the students that that teacher teaches? Like, how do the other students know that teacher's not available today for Lunch and Learn?
We used to have something that we had put on the internet. The secretary would update every day, usually like who's there and who's not there. But that specific question is usually done in the classroom. Like a teacher will know that maybe a couple days in advance and put a note on the board. You'll often see on whiteboards like a grid for the different sections they teach and maybe the work that's assigned. It's also, that stuff's also in Schoology, but usually that's word of mouth. Students always know, like, if my teachers learn 1 or learn 2, they know it really quickly and know that schedule.
And do
Yeah.
teachers have the same learn block, like 1 or 2 consistently for the school year, or can they change it from day to day?
Pretty consistent. It usually stays the whole year. And what we'll do is we'll ask, I'll use the bio, if 5 of you are teaching bio, we'll say make 3 on learn 1, 2 on learn 2 to make sure they're split up so the whole hour has support.
Okay.
So that's how we'll do that in coordination with department chairs to make sure there's balance in learn 1 and learn 2 and opportunities for students.
And it's totally fine to show up to a lunch and learn, or to a learn for a teacher that isn't your teacher if they're teaching your subject?
It's absolutely fine. It rarely happens though, to be honest.
And is there a cap or a limit on how many students can go to, say, a teacher at a time, or maybe a counselor who like physically just doesn't have as much space to see as many students at a time? Is there ever an issue where like too many students want to go and they don't have time to get their questions answered or do their work and they're told to go somewhere else? Like just logistically?
There's not necessarily a cap. It's usually, there's times where a student, I've seen, like, I walked around during the entire lunch and learn. You'll see a student walk in, see a bunch of students there and walk out. So does that happen occasionally? Yes. And what I will say, when I said that happens rarely, I want to change that. When it happens the most is in 9th grade, I had a teacher I really liked, and I might go back to them more frequently. You'll see that. That's where you see it the most. But usually not someone a student doesn't know. They rarely do that.
And then just one.
Okay.
I know you mentioned it earlier, and this is more of like the safety and accountability of where students are at a given time in the building. I know you kind of joked, like, I know where they are. They all have cell phones, even though they're not supposed to. Have we ever tried like a fire drill during lunch and learn to see the logistics of it? I know that's like principal's worst nightmare, like fire drill during lunch or during recess in the elementary or like those more unstructured times. Have we ever done any sort of drill during that time to make sure the logistics work?
I'm glad you asked that. It gives me a chance to share some things that we do. We have a safety group that meets bi-weekly. Kimberly Frazier leads it, Megan Schaefer leads it, and there's representatives from elementary, middle, and high school. So we're always looking at safety procedures. We just reviewed what was brought in front of one of the committee meetings recently of a safety plan. But recently there was, and some of you may know this, there was an Alert Us button, which is our security system, hit at one of our elementary schools that's next to one of our middle schools, and both schools went on lockdown. And that happened and it wasn't expected. And largely every safety drill of that measure is announced in advance, so it's not unexpected for a lot of reasons. And so it was a real-time drill that we learned a lot. And because we have this team, what lessons learned? We brought it to academic council. We're going to have a meeting with all of our safety leaders in each of our buildings, which some buildings it's a principal, a lot of times it's an assistant principal. What are the lessons we learned? But to answer your question directly, yes, we will do a lockdown during transition. And because lunch and learn is an hour and you have 5 minutes between each class, there's a relatively decent portion of the day that's in transition and not in confined rooms. So it's an important thing to think about, and we do have lockdown drills during transition. We announce them in advance. We still use run, hide, fight, so we don't necessarily practice the fight, but we're looking at, thank you for that.
Hopefully not.
But we're looking at, you know,
Unless
students
we
in
want
the
to make
bathroom.
karate as like a gym class that we offer for our students.
So we think about it frequently, and we just talk specifically about this because that event was a real-time drill that we learned from. And what are those lessons learned, and how could we be better because of it?
Thanks.
Dr. Stotner, did you have a question?
Yeah, I had a couple. Scott, I thought you did an excellent job. My kid was constantly in Lunch and Learn at your school, and the reflection that you gave about the amount of times the teachers would say, hey, you need to come to Lunch and Learn, and encourage that behavior was really helpful. I think a lot of this also connects to the sense of belonging and that connection to a teacher that is so, so important in our schools. Because Scott's right, the kids will go to a teacher who they had the year before that they feel really comfortable about the topic. So all of these things marry together, and if we want an effective Lunch and Learn, the more we can build those bonds of trust over the 4 years, the better it is. I always wonder how we can kind of weave this into the middle school experience as well. And in the elementary school experience, WIN, I think, is a great connection. But I guess my question is around the data sets, around, I agree with Todd. I think it would be a fascinating study. We wouldn't have to do it long term, but I think you could do a shorter period study to see how kids are using Lunch and Learn and get enough of a representative sample to be able to apply that to some bigger picture pieces. So we don't have to figure this out now, but I think there are easier ways to take a snapshot of what happens at Lunch and Learn and see if we can find patterns. And I think that goes to Melanie's question in the chat as well. I think that's a good question that she has about how do we encourage kids in ways that isn't when the kids are in tension, where their grades are dropping, that's why they're being told to come. Or there's a big test, that's why they want to go. How can we kind of use this as a tool that they have all the time?
Yeah, and this, thank you for the feedback and the question. And you're right. I think teachers know they have that available. So it's not just for students, but a lot of our teachers are really driven that the students do well. So what we ask teachers to do is invite. If they don't come, tell them they need to do it. And then for the scale of it and thinking about, in our buildings like Lower Merion, for example, 1,700 students, to logistically manage, we'll say, invite, mandate, here's the levels of, then call home. And if none of those things are successful to get the student to you, then you're going to go to an administrator or a counselor, and then we mandate it as if it was a class. So they're the steps we ask people to take. And the reason we say that if you went right to the assistant principal, it would be overwhelming. We wouldn't manage it well. We wouldn't have a system at all. But if we have those steps in between, and usually that works. And can we do that better? Certainly, we're always looking ways to do it. But teachers are also driven to have their students come back to them, and they're motivated to have that happen as well during that 30 minutes.
Do teachers have the flexibility to do things like offering extra credit to students who attend their Lunch and Learn sessions? I know in my own high school experience, I had teachers that if you went to that, you got 1 point on a test or something each time you came. And if you were really working hard on that, that might make the difference, and it would be an extra 20, 30 minutes of study time.
We've been really intentional in measuring learning. So usually not extra credit, but along the same lines, what we'll do is if you want to do a retest, you can't just show up and retest. A lot of our teachers will say, you have to come to a learn session, work at something, earn the right to retest by showing that you're demonstrating. And that's more typical of what you'll see.
Okay.
You'll see that in science a lot. Yep.
I mean, that's
Yep.
extra credit from another perspective. Did we have any other board comments? Sorry, I'll get to you one second. Let me just, do we have any other board comments in the chat? No, okay. So we'll
Yes,
get
Shayna, it's
Kim,
Kimberly.
okay.
Two things.
Right after.
First, I want to agree with you, Shayna, in reference to kids needing to have more autonomy. And really, that's K through 12, but especially at the high school level, they need to have more autonomy so that they're preparing themselves for adulthood. And that they feel that they have control over their lives. I think that's really, really important. My second, the second thing I want to say is a question. Within Lunch and Learn or any time, are there opportunities for kids who need one-on-one support to receive it within the district?
There are certain times we have instructional assistants that also have duty during that time. Every once in a while, that opportunity could be there with the teacher. In general, it's not a structure made available to all, but in necessary, like our achievement teams make plans, and if it's necessary for an individual student, for a variety of reasons, that can be the case.
And are we tracking that data? When they do have this one-on-one support, are we seeing, hey, they're making some improvements, or are they marching in place?
If it goes through the achievement team process, an achievement team is a group of professionals, usually the counselor, the math reading specialist, a psychologist. If it goes through achievement team, which is probably the route it would go, except for special education services, if someone's going to get one-on-one support during that time, then it would be tracked.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Ms. Rubin?
I have one more question. For the technical high school, the students that go to technical high school, I forget what the term.
Central Monco.
Central Monco. We called it VOTEC where I was growing up, so I just kept calling it that. How does Lunch and Learn work with their schedule?
If you remember, we presented during start time change and saying there was two areas that we had concern about. One was athletes that are leaving early, missing more time, and that's the case, and not having the best schedule for students that go to Central Monco Technical High School. So I would still say that's the case in both areas. We have made changes. Where we can, we move students to the AM session, which is a better schedule for them, but it may limit opportunities for students getting in, whether it's a PM session that has a program they like or just acceptance in general. So oftentimes they're taking lunch, leaving class a little bit early to get it, grabbing it and going, and it's not as ideal as the rest of the student body, but we continue to work on that.
To piggyback on that for anybody in the community who's watching it, despite the less than ideal schedule, I will say we got a couple years ago to take a board field trip to Central Monco and get a tour from Central Monco students of all the different programs there. And that school is amazing. If your kid has any interest in those kinds of programs, and they have things like beauty school and cooking school, but they also have all sorts of health sciences and science degrees in there. It was amazing. Kids are leaving and going right into technical apprenticeships. It was fantastic. I wanted to go back and do like a carpentry apprenticeship. It was fantastic. If your kid is at all interested, highly recommend. It's the end of my plug. I didn't get a chance to do a school bus plug, so I did a Central Monco plug. Okay, I believe that's all of our board comments, yes? And
No, it's not all
No,
board
Kimberly,
comments.
hit me up.
I wanted to say ditto in reference to what you just said, Shayna. Central Monco is terrific and they offer fantastic programs. I just wanted to add that we might want to put this on our reading list. It's a new book called The Disengaged Teen, Helping Kids Learn Better, Feel Better, and Live Better. A must read. And that's all I want to say. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Ms. Buckman, can we have the comments from the chat, please?
Sure, so we have some that are directly related to Lunch and Learn presentation, and then others more general, so should I do the Lunch and Learn?
Let's do the ones that are for Lunch and Learn, then I will thank Mr. Weinstein, open it to community comments in person, not on this topic, and then we'll read the chat comments not on this topic.
Okay. Michelle Vessel of Gladwin, Lunch and Learn is a great program. Only constructive criticism I will add is sometimes the teachers learn is too crowded to give the one-on-one time to the student. When that happens, sometimes the teacher will ask the student to make an appointment ahead of time. Melanie doesn't have a last name from Marion Station.
That's Melanie Schaffmeister, the board.
That's Melanie, the board member? Okay.
It is, and I believe Dr. Sautner read her comment as part of our questions.
No, I didn't. I said it's a good comment. You should definitely read it.
Oh, my mistake. Thank you, Curry.
Okay.
Would you please read that one?
Yeah, wait, I just now have to find it again, hold on. Why are fewer college prep students going to Lunch and Learn? I know many will assume it is less motivated students, but is it less encouraged students? Is there any way to find this out?
It is not less encouraged, and it's a small data sample from teachers that I ask. I usually go around and say, what do you do during Lunch and Learn? How do you make that available? So I try to see everybody's, what they're doing, and oftentimes that's the feedback that we hear more frequently.
Do
Transparently.
the high school teachers do like those entrance and exit tickets sometimes like they do in the other grade levels, like a question in there? It might be worth seeing if some of our teachers that are teaching CP that aren't getting kids coming into their Lunch and Learn, just one day ask their kids, like, what would incentivize you to come to Lunch and Learn?
Yeah.
Might be just, we have a captive audience, might ask them.
Also on Lunch and Learn, Kim Lippitz of Narberth, data from Lunch and Learn would be very useful, especially if trying to truly bridge achievement gap and see if students who could benefit the most are utilizing it, and if not, how to encourage students to utilize it. And the rest of them are more general questions.
Fantastic. All right. Both presentations, exceptional. Really appreciate all your hard work tonight. And you are relieved. We will now open up the floor for any community member who has a question or a comment that is related to curriculum stuff in the district, but not related to the comprehensive plan or Lunch and Learn. You can go ahead. Ms. LePere, do you have a sign up? Oh my goodness, I'm so sorry, y'all. I was just rolling. I did not do public comment on the two presentations. Absolutely my mistake. I just made a mistake. Surprise, surprise, I am a human being. If you have any questions or comments on either of those two presentations, or something else, go ahead, come on up, say your full name and what town you live in the district, and you can let us know. Or Ms. LePere, has anybody signed up?
They have not signed up yet, but you can certainly.
Okay, well, if nobody in person would like, or no, we got somebody coming on up, and then once we're done with that, we can go. Oh, you guys, I'm sorry. I was just rolling. I was trying to juggle all the things, and it just went out of my brain. It's a Monday kind of Monday.
Crystal Blunt Ardmore. I have a question. I don't know if we had Lunch and Learn when my kids went through school because, you know, they're older now. And I just have a question. If a teacher has too many students and a student that really needs like help, could that student email that teacher with the issue or the problem and that teacher get back to them so that they could get the help that they need? If they can't wait, say it's way too crowded and there's 50 kids there and you only have 30 minutes? Is
Absolutely.
that a possibility?
It is a possibility. Our students do email their teachers pretty regularly.
All right. I just wanted to know so that they could at least get the help that they need, or say, come back after school, I'm willing to wait, or something like that. I see that this is something that you need to have addressed.
Just along with that topic, well, similar to that, there's two major areas that students come to see their teachers, and we label them skill and will. Will is students that aren't doing work independently, that need to do it, that can do it. And skill more is you need to spend that time with the teacher because you don't understand it and learn it a different way. So our teachers, in knowing those two concepts, try to divide that up, and we'll invite students to sit in an area in the room and just do work, which are students that we would say have an issue with will, and other students that need that direct support, which we would call more skill-related. That's where the one-on-one small group learning usually takes place, the reteaching.
And I have just one more quick question about data and looking at the achievement team data. Do you guys look at that data to see if what has been put in place for any student is actually working? Do you look at the achievement team data?
Achievement team data?
Yeah, because when students
Sure,
go up.
they meet once every 4 days.
And how is that data?
There's two groups. There's
is it shared out, or is it shared out? Like, how do we know? How would?
There's publicly shared out data, and then there's private data that's for students that's teachers or and
So
groups.
when you publicly, so when they did the math on and off ramps and they shared the math on and off ramps data and stuff, do you guys also share the achievement data too as well? Like for achievement teams? Like there's all kinds of data. We
Yeah, I mean,
take
that's,
data.
I think you're talking about standardized test data that we make available, that's available on state sites.
Well, we make that available also, but when you have achievement team data and you have your achievement team meetings, is that data ever looked at and looked at and then trying to figure out, because some student, to see the growth of a student that has been brought up to team?
Can I clarify, are you asking about all of the students that are being evaluated by the achievement team? Because the achievement team is working with individualized students, and
I
we of
know
course,
that.
yeah, no, I'm just trying to clarify. We of course wouldn't share individualized student data, but are you asking if we share out like an aggregated like analysis of
Right,
all of the students
disaggregated
collected?
data. I know you wouldn't share out students' private data
No,
because you
I
can't do that.
I was honestly trying to get
Because
at
we
what
know we can't,
specifically we
yeah,
were asking
we know
for.
we can't do that,
So,
but do
like,
you
an
ever look at
overall-
the disaggregated data or groups of students and look at that data?
So, like,
as
trends of
another-
outcomes
as
of
another
students
way
that
to
were
look at
referred to
data or
achievement
what's
teams.
going on. Yeah, that was just-
Okay.
Crystal, I would say there's three mechanisms that we look at data systematically in schools. One's achievement team, which you're looking at individual data. There's a data team in our high schools that look at data more, I think the way you're asking the question. Then there's PLCs where you're looking at it at the student level per subject area. They're the three meetings that happen once every 4 days. Thank you.
Okay, if that is the totality of our in-person comments, and we can go ahead and hear our online comments. Ms. Buckman.
Okay, Michelle Vessel of Gladwin. Why would you not answer questions that are about the presentation that was just shown? I'm disappointed that you are not answering questions that are about the presentation at a committee meeting where questions are usually answered. Michelle McGill of, she said her town before, Ballackinwood. I asked a direct question. I did not make a comment. Can you please see if someone can answer my question? Kim Lippitz of Narberth. Committee meetings are generally where community questions are responded to. Not one community question was responded to so far. Should we resubmit questions to get a response? Trying to understand why not one community question got a response. Ms. McGill, it is so rude to have parents attend these meetings and not answer questions, especially when my question is directly related to a presentation. These were the ones on Lunch and Learn, just to keep scrolling through, sorry. Ms. Vessel of Gladwin, I hope you will answer the questions I posted regarding the first presentation. How do we know how these actual plans are being implemented, and will you share with us what is working and what has fallen short? When you have focus groups, are community members involved? If a parent is interested in being part of a focus group, is that possible? What is the subject of the upcoming teacher training? And then Dr. Sautner had shared a comment on Ms. Blunt's question. Sounds to me like, do you ever publicly share the aggregated achievement team data? But I think you already answered that, so that's it.
Apologies if you didn't think your question was answered. I was at the podium without a pen and paper. There were a lot of questions answered at once. Every name that was in the chat, I know who you are. I remain available to you to have deeper conversations. For example, what's working, what's not working is a really broad question. If you want to learn about that, I remain available to you. Thank you.
Thank you. And again, you can follow up by email for anybody if you have a specific question on that. I don't know if we have I don't know what professional development was being referenced there. I think maybe the one that's,
The one that's coming up,
yeah.
Yeah, there's.
It's dependent on what grade level and
I'm
things.
going to give you an example. I'll quantify it a little bit. In high school, we teach upwards of like 230 courses. So when you say what professional development's happening, there's science and there's several science courses. So it's a really complex thing to answer simply here. So there is.
It's up to the departments, it's up to the.
Yeah, I mean, if somebody wants to know anything specifically, we remain available to you. We're not trying to avoid the questions. There's a lot of them, and some of them are harder to answer specifically when they're really broad. And if you genuinely want to know, I'll try to do my best to answer the specific questions of what they are.
Yeah, I mean, I think generally it wasn't like the district is doing a professional development for every staff member this Friday or whatever.
I think that's probably the question is there?
Yeah, so professional development has a lot of different flavors, shall we say, and there are different types and they cover all sorts of different subjects, and some of them are based on who's learning to be a trainer in certain things, who's teaching what subject, who's at what grade level, and then there'll be some that we'll have for a full district. So I commiserate that that's a little bit trickier on this particular instance to answer for every teacher. That said, our next meeting for the curriculum committee of the board will be March 10th. Did you have another comment you wanted to make before we close out? Come on, right ahead. Just say your full name and the town you live in.
Hi, Fatima Rogers, Bala Kenwood. I just wanted to say to the team, to Superintendent, Acting Superintendent, Megan, Scott, and the members of the board, thank you. It's a long day after a long night. Go Birds. And you all are super attentive, super focused, and very prepared. So on behalf of our community, we thank you for what you're doing. Thanks.
Thanks, Dr. Rogers.
Thank you, and we appreciate you being here to be part of this conversation. It is really just so much nicer to sit here and have faces to look at than empty chairs. So we appreciate your faces.
Before we close, let me say one thing. First of all, thank you, Dr. Rogers. The two things. Dr. Ranelli is in the district tomorrow, for those who are listening. So he's coming in. The transition's working well. We're working together. Only a few more weeks, I think maybe 8, 9 weeks, something like that. And you guys will be, I'm counting them for you, actually. I want you guys to have stability in the district, and I'm not that. And the second thing, for whoever is listening out there, I know that you must listen to weather. And you must know that there's weather coming in this week. So let's all kind of be ready for what we have starting tomorrow, going all night tomorrow. If you get my picture, into Wednesday morning, and maybe stopping Wednesday morning at some point. So we'll be in touch, right, Amy? And
AKA remind your kid to take home their device and look for their charger now, because they may need it tomorrow or the next day.
It's funny, Shane, the worst winter you guys have had in like 4 years, I have to be here to do that.
I mean,
ice that's a quarter-inch thick, and snow and everything else.
I will tell you all, when I first got elected, the very first question I asked was, I'm not at all in charge of deciding when we have a weather closure, are we? And I have never been so excited to get a no in my life. That said, next meeting of this committee is March 10th at 7 p.m. in this room, and I will see you all there.